Fundamental difference to how you would evaluate a business that's more like a cash flow business versus something where you're intentionally building a business to sell?
Well, yes and no, because notoriously cash is king for all businesses. And if you've got a really healthy cash business, that's going to help a buyer want to buy it. YouTube University. It's the age-old question. So in my professional opinion, the earlier you can bring some kind of strategic financial advice, like a CFO in, the better your business is likely to do. However, I don't stand by people hiring in a CFO full-time, really early stage. And I don't stand by people paying for financial advice that when they're not making any money or they don't have a sufficient amount of money to.
Can you give a concrete example also of how it's like something more than ticking the boxes, something that you didn't realize was a strategic opportunity, just so it's easier to understand? Karen, welcome to Growth Stories. So happy to have you on the show. And you are running Soul CFO. You're providing like fractional CFO services. And I'd love to hear, what does Soul CFO do? Why do you exist?
Exists because basically I had a number of friends who were starting their own business or in business, and they didn't really have access to good strategical finance advice. And as a result, I was helping them over a coffee or over dinner. And they were like, you really need to launch this as a service. So I launched it about 6 years ago when fractional CFO work probably wasn't as common as it is now. It's certainly not in the UK. Definitely it was emerging within the US and North America. But really, it was to fill a need. It was to
Yeah.
fill a void that I could see in the market that was surrounding me, because I have a lot of business owners in my network and they just weren't getting the right financial advice. So I decided to step into the game.
Stop doing it for free. I love it. Yeah.
I mean, they bought me the coffee. They bought me the
Yeah.
coffee. But like, yeah, I realized I could price a little bit higher than a cup of coffee. So yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, 6 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so from my understanding, or at least like other business owners that I talk to, they have this idea that a CFO makes sense at a certain revenue level. Like,
Yeah.
and what is that true? And what is that point? Like, where does the business need to be at before you need a CFO versus a spreadsheet
This is
and
the
YouTube University?
YouTube University. It's the age-old question. So in my professional opinion, the earlier you can bring some kind of strategic financial advice, like a CFO in, the better your business is likely to do. However, I don't stand by people hiring in a CFO full-time, really early stage. And I don't stand by people paying for financial advice that when they're not making any money or they don't have a sufficient amount of money to
Yeah.
spend on that. What I say is the earlier you can bring somebody in, the better, only because the right CFO, the commercially minded CFOs, will help your business grow. They won't just tick the box. And I think it's a common misconception that finance is really about ticking boxes and getting reporting done and just kind of doing the things that are necessary to do, when actually modern day, and well, for most of my career, commercial finance is actually about helping you grow the business and helping you make decisions that are going to keep your business going longer and stronger.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, when I'm hired, all I will tell you is that each and every one of my clients say, I wish I'd hired you sooner.
Started sooner. Can you give us a concrete example, since that is such a pervasive idea that you don't need it until, you've hit some larger milestone. So
Yeah.
like, can you give a concrete example also of how it's like something more than ticking the boxes, something that you didn't realize was a strategic opportunity, just so it's easier to understand, like what is.
So I would say overall, when a CFO comes in, they help you identify the numbers that you can look at in your business that will evaluate whether or not you're doing well or in comparison to the market. Because a CFO, especially a fractional CFO, will have an array of knowledge based on either the industry or just generally how businesses look, they know what metrics look good and what metrics look not so great, where you might not, because it might be the only business that you've ran, or you just don't have any peers in that industry to be comparing, or you're not even looking at the numbers that you know you need to look at. Because every founder is probably told that they need to look at your revenue. Everybody focuses on revenue. They might look at their costs and they might look at profit, but they're unlikely to always look at some of the key metrics that, for example, in an e-commerce business, if that's who we're talking to, your return on ad spend is going to be one of the key metrics that you need to be looking at. And instead of just listening to your marketing agency who are going to feed you a number that sounds good,
Yeah, yeah. We need a bigger budget is what they will say.
we having an objective outsider that can show you how to calculate that on your own and be able to sort of pierce holes in what they're saying is where a
Hmm.
CFO would step in. And that's notoriously kind of one of the first things I help e-commerce businesses with is, are we getting enough out of our marketing team? And it's not clear cut. I know that there's an ebb and flow when it comes to marketing. It's not always going to play out in the metrics so well, but it is something that if you evaluate over time, the numbers need to stack up on some way, shape, or form, if that makes sense. So that's one of the key examples that I can use that most e-commerce businesses that I've started working with haven't necessarily looked at those numbers or looked at what I would deem
Right.
to be their key metrics. And it can be used across a lot of businesses is just what are the key things that actually drive your business, identifying those and then monitoring those can really reshape how you run your business.
Yeah, especially with consistency. I'm thinking of other business owner sins. You just rarely look at things or you look when there's a problem, which is much different than always comparing yourself consistently to industry benchmarks and making sure you're not skipping any one particular element.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think the thing is, if you're reluctant to hire in a CFO or you're not sure about the value of them, maybe just speak to someone in that a CFO for like a couple of hours. They'll help you identify those metrics and then you keep looking at them. So
yeah.
that's the easiest way to get a lot of money and a lot of value out of a finance professional without having to necessarily commit to them is
Yeah.
getting that information because that will really help you shape the business. Obviously, they can help you further if discuss the options and come up with insights, but that
Hmm.
would be the basics that I recommend any business owner do.
That makes a lot of sense. And then it's just making me smile because I know that giving someone information is not often enough to make them execute or consistently, which is why I guess that's why one of the reasons it's so useful to have somebody on your team, even if it's only fractionally. One question
Yeah.
I have is is there a fundamental difference to how you would evaluate a business that's more like a cash flow business versus something where you're intentionally building a business to sell?
Well, yes and no, because notoriously cash is king for all businesses. And if you've got a really healthy cash business, that's going to help a buyer want to buy it. So ultimately, I don't think there's much of a difference because when you're trying to grow a business to sell it, you're trying to optimize all of the KPIs, the key performance indicators in your business. That's going to be your revenue, it's going to be your cash, and it's going to be these key metrics that we've just been talking about. I would be doing that anyway in a business, and I recommend most people, when they're running a business, be doing that, be keeping an eye on those key metrics and performance because that's going to help you grow. You might push a little less if you're not trying to sell, you might be less aggressive with it, and you might make different decisions but you're ultimately going to be looking at the same things financially.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So yeah, from the financial point of view, it's very similar. I guess the differences are going to come down to risk and what makes a buyer happy. But some of those elements are outside of the finance realm.
Yeah. I think the one difference, which I think many people think about when you're selling a business, is that your numbers need to be your T's crossed and your I's dotted. Now, if you have somebody running your finances and you have a CFO in, the chances are they're already in place for like the numbers are already reported in the right way and structured in the right way for you to be able to go through a transaction such as a sale. If you don't have someone in place, then that might be why people decide to bring in a CFO at that point because, how is a polite way to say this? Like you're putting it all together with sticky back plastic, like you're stringing it all together, but
Yeah.
it's not quite exactly where it needs to be. And there's
Holes.
a few holes and a few cobwebs and a few corners that you don't really want anyone to look at. But when you are selling a company, someone's going to look at it. So you need
Yeah.
to be able to put that in front of somebody else. And that's the time where usually, if they haven't had a CFO before, they'll bring in a CFO there, which is why I know I'm selling my own product here, but the earlier you get somebody in, the easier those things can be.
Yeah. Prevention is the best medicine.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, it's like, it's like eating healthy. It's like
Yeah.
eating healthy will help you longer term with your health, keeping an eye on your finances, even if you, whether it's you or, bringing a CFO in, keeping an eye on it will ultimately help you longer term in the business.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
And one question I love asking right now, because the whole world is AI crazy.
Oh,
Everyone's
yep.
Has that actually materially affected how you do what you do, the AI tools, or is it a distraction for your particular area?
It's helped my marketing be a lot more
We're going
streamlined.
crazy with it over in marketing.
It helps me write copy and stuff sometimes, so the marketing's a bit more streamlined. So AI to me is a little bit of a controversial topic in the finance industry because there's so much machine learning already available in our industry, but there seems to be a lack of adoption. And to a degree, I would argue that we're the ones holding it back. Accounting professionals are holding it back provisionally because there's so many opportunities available. There's so many softwares being released and various different things that can help elevate everybody's business. But not every single accountant actually wants to work with those, implement those, save time because accountants still charge by the hour.
Oh yeah,
So
you guys have to stop that.
yeah, so there's this like I can see a push and shove specifically with, I work with bookkeepers and accountants that kind of provide information to me as the CFO, and I'm notoriously always going in and going like, can we implement this software? Can we implement this software? It's going to help time. And I know we're speaking about AI rather than just software, but it's AI and machine learning and everything that
Yeah.
is available, and it's not quite where it needs to be yet from an accounting perspective, from a finance perspective, but we're headed in that direction. And I think the people that will hold it back is the industry itself. It's like it's one of those annoying self-regulated industries that,
Mm.
yeah, so I think there's going to be a little bit of controversy as we grow through that. But there's definitely
Somehow that's
software
comforting
that
to
makes.
me.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Why?
like if there's anyone that's slow and careful, I hope it's the finance people.
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, when it comes to AI, though,
Yeah.
specifically the generative AI that we're using day in, day out, we have to be careful as professionals to what we feed it, because if we feed sensitive information on our client that's not necessarily secure and protected,
Hmm.
that's an issue. So we need to be really careful. But the stuff that there's great ways to use that to come up with formula for models in Excel that you use. I can get it to spit out a spreadsheet template. I'm not gonna lie, they're not as good as the ones I just build myself, but it sometimes cuts corners. It sometimes helps, and I see it being something that could help much more in the future. I think the softwares that are built around it are going to be the ones to watch and the ones that we can use to really do it. I think it's helpful to have, but having a financially business, no, what am I going to say? It's helpful to have, but having a finance professional be able to use it is more useful than doing it on your own at the moment.
Yeah, I believe that. I definitely believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this seems like it's very suited for very specific tasks. Anything with numbers or actual, you want hard, concrete, deterministic behavior,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not quite the strength that a CFO has and a commercial finance person is about looking forward and planning and making up what life is going to look like. And there's too many variables with that and a lot of thinking that goes around that I think it will take AI a while to catch up with. But I certainly like playing with prompts that I can provide business owners that will
Yeah.
help them just analyze their business in like 5 minutes. That's always fun.
Yes. Yeah, everyone wants the prompts now. It's kind of
Yeah.
we've all been trained already. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've heard actually from other people in enterprise, I've talked to a lot of different people like CROs, and they always talk about the CFO is like the head of greenlighting things. You got to get them to say yes.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really caught my attention was just this year that we have, at least in, well, both in Europe and in the United States, there's economic uncertainty. Maybe we're going to have a recession, and there's also there's like higher global uncertainty, and the total number of projects that are being approved is lower. It's like lower than ever before for larger enterprises. They're just not saying yes to as many ideas, so it's much more conservative right now. And I was wondering, like, how should business owners handle this kind of economic environment? Which is a
That's a
really easy question. Yeah,
It's a
love to
great
hear your thoughts.
question. It's a great question. So the reality is it depends on the business that you're in. We can't foresee the demand that there will be. You know, we're only 5 years off what was a pretty historic event when COVID hit,
Mhm,
and what online yoga studios suddenly took off and, made so much money. Zoom went through the roof.
mhm.
And yet, at the same time, restaurants who you always thought had a stable income no longer, and airlines started to struggle. So you can't necessarily always predict the way that the demand will shift, because as we go through economic uncertainty as businesses, that's also driving economic uncertainty with the population as a whole and consumers. Now, there's some things that are going to be basic needs, and there's some things that people decide are basic needs in that sphere. So you need to know a little bit about your market and whether you're placing yourself in a luxury field or you're placing yourself somewhere in the middle. So know your market, know what they're likely to do, and predict your forecasts and look forward in
Yeah.
your planning, making adjustments for a potential uncertainty within your market, and be realistic about about the certainty of your future incomes, and make adjustments accordingly. I guess the good reason that I'm a CFO is I'm a little bit risk averse when it
Yeah.
comes to when it
It's another
comes
good
to
trait. Yes.
business decisions. I find that when I work with men, that's a really good trait, because men are notoriously more risk takers in business. And I'm often having to play the other side, where I'm pulling them back from making quite quick decisions or moving forward too fast. So if you are, mainly I'm going to speak to the men in the audience, if you are that business owner where you do things quickly without necessarily looking at the data, without necessarily speaking to everyone in your team, try and look a little bit more at the data before you make decisions, and try and speak to more people and get more advice, specifically from a variety of people within your team,
Hmm.
be that
Yeah.
get like a few women to play in, because again, this is an observation and just notoriously well known. Women tend to be more risk averse when it comes to finances than men. And so if you get a degree of opinions from your leadership team, and that spans across different backgrounds and different genders, then you're more likely to be making a more cautious decision. And that in this market that we're in, you just need to be a bit more cautious. But if you've got good forecasts, you have a good idea of what your audience is doing, that's going to help you.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much, Karen. It's a great conversation.
No worries. It's delightful to speak to you. And I love to speak about finance when it comes to supporting businesses.
Thank you.